Hi, I'm Max Keiser. This is the Keiser Report. Lots of geopolitical news to cover. Stacy.
Well, we have stories here about Nigeria because in the second half, we interview Ray Youssef, who is the CEO and founder of Paxful.com. And the important thing about this is that we did interview him just before Friday afternoon when Nigeria's central bank orders banks to close accounts of all crypto users. Any breaches of the order would face severe regulatory sanctions, the central bank warned. Just so you know, for the second half, we interviewed Ray Youssef before that. But the important thing about this is the central bank is, banning banks from doing business with any companies within Nigeria who deal with cryptocurrency. Of course, India tried this about 2 years ago, and then that ruling got overturned by the Supreme Court. So now Nigeria is doing this amidst, some pretty high inflation rates of 13%. And of course, this COVID lockdown, which is restricting already the financial grid built on top of the dollar. So I want to remind Nigeria an important point that one of the greatest investors in America said just this past year, about 6 months ago. He said, Bitcoin is a bet on the human ingenuity. That's really important when you look at Nigeria, because Nigeria is blessed on the one hand with a lot of oil, but it's really blessed, uniquely so for many countries, with human ingenuity. I mean, they have entrepreneurs that you just can't believe, like the huge Nollywood industry, the huge rap industry, the local decentralized, locally owned sort of distribution of music, content, things like that.
It is a booming entrepreneurial country with a young population who took to Bitcoin readily because it superseded all of the banking infrastructure that Nigerians had been blocked from using. The international banking sector and also banking between countries, between African countries, just moving money from next door to a country is almost impossible all over the continent of Africa. And once Bitcoin unlocked the entrepreneurialism of the Nigerians, we saw a boom in that economy. And we saw something that nobody had expected, and that is a way out of a lot of the interference that comes from outside Nigeria.
Right. And I want to point out, I had mentioned that Nigeria is a huge oil producer. And I'll show you these photos to avoid any copyright issues. This is just Google images of flaring. You see? So they flare, which is a total waste of the opportunity of that. You could have used that energy to create value. And now, because of Bitcoin, you could actually capture that energy and convert it directly. That flaring no longer needs to happen thanks to Bitcoin and Bitcoin's very closest relationship with energy and energy consumption. So you could capture that and directly into Bitcoin. So they lose so much money from that. That's not only causes environmental disaster, but it wastes money.
The government of Nigeria, like individuals, they have a problem when it comes to Bitcoin because it doesn't fit any model that they have ever seen, that they've ever been used to figure out how to run an economy. And at first there's resistance. And then they notice that their paper money, it becomes increasingly worthless. And that's true of all paper money. It's been so for 300 years. All fiat money goes to loss of 99.9% of purchasing power without exception. And now what smart individuals are doing and smart corporations are doing, and increasingly now smart countries are doing, is stockpiling Bitcoin by using flaring gas rigs to convert it into the hardest money ever known in human history, and that is in Bitcoin. So it's a bump in the road, but I trust that eventually the smart enough cadre of folks in the country will figure this out.
Of course, you can't ban Bitcoin as a thing. All they could do is ban banks from taking fiat, naira, or US dollars are also used there and converting it to using any company that uses that. So you're likely to just cause a whole stampede out of both the US dollar, which is happening anyway, and your own currency. So as you mentioned, it's the hardest currency of all. But importantly, that US financial grid, where all trades have to settle, even for a second, in dollars. You know, we saw Bank Paribas out of France caught up in that because of doing trade. One company in France doing one company with in Iran, and they got fined $1 billion in the U.S. for we had nothing to do with the U.S. other than for a fraction of a second, it has to get converted to dollars. So most of Africa is cut off from that financial grid anyway, because it's not worth the KYC AML for the U.S. banks to even bother with dealing with Africa. And even if it is, then it's it's not just direct between banks. It's between 3 or 4 banks that have to go jumping between correspondent banks. So it adds up costs. So what we found is that Nigeria is now the number 2 Bitcoin market on this fast growing global marketplace. This is a story from the mainstream courts sort of press in the United States. We're talking about Paxful, and this was in December. So Nigeria, by far, over the 3, 4, 5, and 6 in this list, where huge volume of trade happening because of Bitcoin. And why it was? Well, it's mostly to do with international trade, because they're not able to access any dollars to import. There's a huge import business from Japan in particular, from used cars, but they couldn't get any dollars. And then they found Bitcoin, and they started using Bitcoin for trade, which is that's what the international settlements layer is supposed to be about.
Well, we're heading for a very interesting showdown. Here's the fact. With Bitcoin, anyone can transact with anyone, and anyone can store a value, which is unconfiscatable from any state, unconfiscatable in any context. One of these countries where the government tries to quote unquote ban Bitcoin, they're going to find that their population essentially ignores the government. And once that precedent is set, then we're going to see that, like dominoes, central banks all over the world will start to realize that they're no longer needed. It's the horse and buggy era. Something new has come along.
Right. But you and I have been pointing out for quite a long time now that a lot of the things you're seeing in the global economic and financial systems are due to a declining empire. This has happened 18 times in recorded human history of an empire collapsing. And that's always an opportunity for all the other countries of the world to escape that system, right? So you could use this opportunity. Bitcoin is going to replace the US dollar in the global financial grid as a settlements layer, as a unit of account. Your people already figured that out. They're way ahead of of Europe, the UK, of Australia, of the United States. Nobody uses it as a unit of account yet, but the Nigerian people do, because they need to, because of necessity. But why not try to pull them back to the horse and buggy, as you're saying? Why try to drag them back, especially in the future? China is going to be the number 1 trading partner anyway, because China doesn't use the US dollar system as they're trying to break away from it. They want free trade. That's all they care about, is just free trade. So I don't understand why they don't just foster this. Plus the oil age is almost over too. So you've received a lot of hard currency in a US dollar system. It's relative to the rest of the currencies, the hardest fiat currency of them all. So use that as an opportunity to launch yourself into this next phase, because it's open. It's up for grabs. Who's going to be the fastest horse in this fastest horse race?
Right. Well, I'm not worried. I'll tell you why. Because what's going to happen, it could be Nigeria, or will be Nigeria, or Iran, China, Venezuela, a lot of these countries, Pakistan, that are now experimenting with Bitcoin in a big way. What'll happen is that the countries will attempt to ban, and the population will simply secede, and they'll use it anyway. And what that'll do, the response of the government, and this is beautiful, it's built into the Bitcoin protocol. It's almost divine. I think it is divine. The government, in response, will print more fiat money. And that'll only drive the price of Bitcoin higher and drive more people into Bitcoin. So they're trapped in a bit of a Chinese torture trap. You 2 fingers are in there and you can't pull it out. The Nigerian government, this is the first step now toward, this step had to happen. But now what also has to happen is the people are just going to say, well, you know what, we don't choose to recognize that, and we don't need to.
Well, okay, this is a headline from 2018. Oil-rich Nigeria outstrips India as country with most people in poverty. So number one in the world for the absolute number, not relative number, but absolute number of people in poverty. Nigeria, one of Africa's two wealthiest economies, has overtaken India as home to the world's greatest concentration of extreme poverty, amid warnings that the continent will host 9 out of the 10 world's poorest people within 12 years. There are 87 million people in Nigeria living in extreme poverty because of twofold, because the oil curse, right? The resource curse, but Cantillon effect. So that's what you're seeing. Bitcoin destroys the Cantillon effect. You want to help lift these people out of poverty. We know, everybody has seen that the people of Nigeria are some of the most entrepreneurial in the world. So you don't, all you have to do is get out of their way and just give them a hard currency like Bitcoin that is permissionless. So they don't have to, all of Africa suffers from this problem of a very, very permissioned financial grid that they're cut off from. So they make it seem like it's a meritocracy, like it's free trade and globalization for all. Well, just try to trade, right? Try to get anybody to accept your currency. Try to get anybody to allow you to have banking facilities to pay that car dealership in Japan. Well, Bitcoin, it levels the playing field for all.
Right. Well, those 87 million in extreme poverty, this is actually a huge bonus because 87 million people have nothing left to lose. And the government will not be able to paper over that by money printer go burr. And the pimp people will simply say, well, you had your chance. You made us poor. Now we're leaving you. Bye, government. Adios.
In the last 5 years, Nigeria has traded 60,215 Bitcoins valued at more than $566 million, which, apart from the U.S., is the largest volume worldwide on Paxful, a leading peer-to-peer Bitcoin marketplace. The data scrape from CoinDance shows from the beginning of May 2015 to the middle of November this year, Bitcoin trade in Nigeria has increased yearly at least 19% in volume since 2017, and the highest volume was traded in 2020. 2020, because of COVID, because of the lockdowns, because of the crash in the velocity of money, because they were cut off from the grid of the financial world, especially the Western governments, which are all in lockdown. Well, Nigeria is not in lockdown.
Speaking of Paxful, let's take a break. And when we come back, talk to the CEO of Paxful. Don't go away. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to go to Ray Youssef. He's the CEO of Paxful. Ray, welcome to the Keiser Report.
Happy to be here, Max. Finally, I get to meet the man himself.
Yeah, long-term follower, and glad to get you on. Now, tell us about Paxful. What does the company do? And tell us also about the focus on Africa.
Well, Pax means peace in Latin, so the name of the company is essentially peaceful. Me and my co-founder believe that an honest money system could make for a more peaceful world. So Paxful started 5 years ago. I met my co-founder in our very first Bitcoin meetup, and we bonded over the fact, or the belief rather, that Bitcoin could be used as a means of exchange, a means of trade to help the little guy. And that's why we're here. We started Paxful because we believe people should have access to financial freedom. They should have access to their own money, and they shouldn't have to ask for permission for it.
Yeah, interesting Pax piece, the equation that you're making there. And we often say that fiat money is backed by, as Paul Krugman at the New York Times says, men with guns. There's a direct connection between war and fiat money. And with Bitcoin, we see kind of a trend toward more peaceful interactions, because Bitcoin being unconfiscatable, you cannot coerce somebody into getting or stealing their Bitcoin. Now, let me ask you about Africa more generally. I understand in Nigeria, it's second only behind the United States in terms of Bitcoin penetration. What's your experience there in terms of volume, velocity? I'm hearing really that Nigeria is leading the world in a lot of ways. It's going hyper-Bitcoinization. Up to 30% of the population is using it. Who's using it? What's going on there, Ray?
Well, you really opened up a can of worms right there. So Paxful is the leading cryptocurrency exchange and marketplace in Nigeria. It's our #1 market. It jumped ahead of the United States about a year ago. The amount of volume, you can see our volumes are public. You can see them on coin.dance for Nigeria and the entire world. But literally tens of millions go through there every week. So Nigeria is an incredible place. I've been telling people that Nigeria is the next America. I've been saying that for the past 4 years. Everyone, they've been laughing at me the entire time. They're still laughing, but things are going to start to change soon. In fact, 5 years ago, when Paxful went into Africa first, everyone laughed at us. They said that Africans would never figure Bitcoin out. They said that Africans only make $2 a day. They're never going to be able to afford a Bitcoin. But fast forward to the future, what the peoples of Africa have done, especially the Nigerian people, is they've actually taught us what the killer app of Bitcoin truly is. And it doesn't have to be a way for us to, pay for a Starbucks coffee. Bitcoin is a means of exchange. And what Paxful does is it turns Bitcoin into a universal translator and transporter of money. I'll give you some examples if you'd like, but basically any form of money in the world can be converted to any other form of money in the planet. And the Nigerians especially have found out how to do this for any use case. For example, someone living in Africa could ask their relative in California to buy them a gift card code with cash, right? Send them the gift card code, they take the gift card code, they sell it on Paxful to someone in China for Bitcoin. They take the Bitcoin, they sell it to someone in Nigeria, and they get a bank transfer locally from their bank account to theirs. What they basically did is turn a USD gift card into a Naria bank transfer. With 2 peer-to-peer transfers, any form of money can become any other form of money. And this has amazing implications for payments, for remittance, for almost any use case imaginable. And the Nigerian people are also very ingenious. They figured out almost any use case. I can give you some more examples as well, but wealth preservation is another great use case for Nigeria. The Nigerian Naira has been under attack. It's been one of the principal victims of the currency wars. Not many people talk about this, but this is a real thing. Nigeria is the leading economy in Africa, and we all know what Africa has been through these past 100 years. Financial apartheid has shown no signs of letting down. And ultimately, what Paxful does, it's a tool against financial apartheid. I shouldn't have to, my PR publicist told me not to use that word or phrase because it's controversial, but that's what it is. Because if you look at the obstacles, the blockades against the peoples of Africa, their money is not as good as our money in the Western golden circle of finance. And they have to wrestle with that. For an African to make a payment in China is nearly a nightmare. They'll have to take their Naira, buy USD on the black market, go through 4 or 5 rings, and then finally they can get it to Hong Kong, get it to China. They lose, 2 weeks of time, 40, 50%, if they can do it at all, or they can just go on to Paxful and sell the Bitcoin to someone who'll do an Alipay transfer for them, and the deal is done and business is restored. It's beautiful. So it's a long-winded question, answer for a long and tough question, but Nigeria is absolutely blowing the United States away. Considering the amount of money at play here and the sheer energy at play, Nigeria is like orders of magnitude ahead of the United States in terms of adoption. The sheer intensity of adoption it's remarkable.
No problem with financial apartheid. I often use the phrase interest rate apartheid to describe kind of the relationship between those who can borrow at 0% and other people who are forced to borrow at 16 to 20 to 30 and higher percent. But this Nigerian story is fantastic because they've been cut out of the banking system for decades, and Africa is typically where other countries go to steal wealth. And yet we've got an incredibly entrepreneurial country with Nigeria. Everyone is, out there making a buck, if you will, and it's incredibly entrepreneurial. And in the U.S., they seem to, and other countries, seem to be falling back to more of a censorship-prone, controlled, command and control economy. And they fear Bitcoin because it's a challenge to paper money and fiat money. There's a race going on right now. Different countries are looking at Bitcoin in different ways. I liken it to the Sputnik moment when Soviet Union put that satellite up in orbit, and suddenly America was in the space race. It seems like right now, the question is not, will governments regulate Bitcoin? The question is, which government is going to dominate in the Bitcoin-led 21st century? And my bet for the last year or so, I've been saying this a lot, is Nigeria. Nigeria is the lead horse in this race. They've got the entrepreneurs. They've got the urgency because they've been cut out of the banking system for so long. Now they're free, finally, to transact, do business. And is that a good way to look at it. I want to dig into a little bit more here. So it's already a unit of account in Nigeria. That is to say, Bitcoin. They're already thinking in terms of Bitcoin. It's become hyper Bitcoinization over there. They do a lot of import and export on used cars, partly due to the COVID and partly with the U.S. banking regulation. That used car business is a big business. So just to keep on this topic a little bit, dig into how that all works.
Sure. So, for example, 2 years ago, the Nigerian central bank, they stopped allowing Nigerians to send Naira out as USD and euros, right? Because they wanted to hold on to the euros and USD for themselves to buy weapons, medical supplies, whatever. What happened was this whole industry of entrepreneurs in Nigeria that were buying used cars from Detroit and sending them over to Nigeria to make anywhere from 100 to 400% profit, they couldn't do their business anymore. So all these guys came online looking for Bitcoin, and they had no way to really buy Bitcoin because there's no Coinbase in Nigeria, right? There was all these other exchanges weren't around back then, right? There was only Paxful, and I would talk to each one of these guys and ask them, why are you looking for Bitcoin? They say, I don't know. I'm looking for anything that can help me restore my business. I told them, no problem. You want to buy a car in Detroit? Buy, it's $4,000, buy $4,000 worth of Bitcoin, go on to Paxful, sell it to this dude in America and ask him to make a bank transfer for you from his bank account to the auction house bank account, upload the invoice for him. And they were like, no way. Is this a scam? They tried it. It worked. Boom. Their business was restored. They could get across this internal blockade that their own central bank put on them for, whatever reason. Probably it was external pressure from the currency wars. And their business was restored. And there's so many examples like that. For example, in Nigeria, if you have a debit card and you have a lot of money in the account, they limit you to $100 USD that you can spend online per month. You're not even buying an Xbox with that. So for every single obstacle or limit or blockade in the way of Nigerians, they have found a way around it with peer-to-peer and Bitcoin. It literally gives them access to every financial network in the world. And in fact, I can give you another, here's a little touch-up of the story. So 5 years ago, when we got to Nigeria, the price of Bitcoin was anywhere from 40 to 60% above market. No one knew how to we knew we had to get Bitcoins into Africa, and we knew why Nigeria was the gateway. But how do you get Bitcoins into Africa? How are they going to pay for it? How do you get money out of Nigeria? That's a huge problem that whole corporations have been set up to fix. We had to figure that out first. So what did we do? Cacao beans weren't the answer. You have to buy 10 tons of cacao beans at $10 million to be able to get them out of the country. So we had to find something else. What we found is a digital asset that we could give Nigerians to export for Bitcoin. And that digital asset was gift cards. We connected Nigerian gift card sellers to Chinese gamers. And that is a trade route that got all the first Bitcoin into Africa.
That's a fascinating story. It's a fantastic story. It shows the triumph of trade, peaceful trade, loving trade, enabled by Bitcoin. Is there a secondary monetary velocity consequence of all this trade? In other words, is the Bitcoin phenomenon spilling over to generally greater GDP growth in Nigeria?
I wouldn't be able to say right now, but we see the Bitcoin trade is most certainly spilling over into other countries surrounding Nigeria, like Ghana, for example, like Kenya, like South Africa, like Cameroon is really blowing up on Paxful. So people are starting to figure this out. I mean, when you look at Africa, it's an amazing continent, but there's 2,000 payment networks in Africa, and only 3% of them talk to each other. Sending money from one country to the country next door is a nightmare with their banking system. It's either just to get on a plane with a suitcase full of cash. And here comes Bitcoin. It solves the problem of cross-border payments, whether it's remittance, whether it's a corporation paying its VAs, whatever it might be. It is proving an absolutely indispensable tool for the ingenious African people.
Tell us about some of these projects you've got going here. You're building schools. What's going on there, Ray?
Yes, sir. Our mission is to build 100 schools in the next 5 years in Africa and the emerging world. We're also building wells. So it's not just a pipe dream. We've actually finished our 4th school. We started in Rwanda with 2 schools there for 400 students. And we don't just build the schools and forget about them. We continuously upgrade the schools. We added a clinic, solar panels, a sports field, all kinds of things to our schools. It's almost like a game of Sin City for me. In 2017 happened and the bull run was going. Me and my co-founder had to decide, we've got some extra cash. What are we going to do with it? Are we going to buy Lambos? We decided to build schools and wells in Africa and the emerging world. The reason why I did this, that's a long story, but to cut it short, I was in New Orleans when Hurricane Katrina happened. Well, I actually came there the first day the city was open because I wanted to help. And I managed to rebuild the first school to open up in New Orleans. And because that school opened up, all the police and fire department could come back because they had a place to put their children. The city actually opened up. So it showed me the power of education to be able to sponsor and promote greater development. So here we have Built with Bitcoin, 100 schools, and we're just getting started. Our 4th school just finished in Nigeria, in Kaduna State. We're going to be opening it up soon. You're invited, Max.
Oh, awesome. Count me in. Ray Youssef, CEO of Paxful. Thanks for being on Keiser Report.
Thank you so much, Max.
All right, and that's going to do it for this edition of Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. I want to thank Ray Youssef, CEO of Paxful. Until next time, bye, y'all.